Hey, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here at First Mount Pleasant Baptist Church for our panel kickback discussion. For our with our children, youth, and young adult ministry. Play there, you guys. All right. Is there a delay or can you guys hear me? Just give me a thumbs up just to make sure that you can hear me, which means our viewers can hear us as well. Awesome. We're so excited to be here this morning. I am Pastor Riz, the youth and young adult pastor here at First Mount Pleasant Baptist Church. I have a slew of panelists today that's going to join us in our discussion this morning. Listen, we are so excited that you have decided to join us. We pray and hope that what we are going to share today will prick your hearts, not only prick your hearts, but also give you the knowledge that you need to go forth in the day and times that we are in. I'm going to first start off with our pastor who have given us the platform to be able to do this as a youth and young adult ministry. Our very own overseer, Victor DeMonte. You guys know him throughout the world. You know, he's an international bishop is what we call him. We are excited that he's here with us this morning. He has many accolades behind his name, and we are excited that he has joined us on this panel. We thank you, Overseer Tate, for just allowing us to be here and you being with us this morning. We thank you, thank you, thank you. We also have Dr. Cherry with us this morning. She is a profound therapist as well as preacher of the gospel of Jesus Christ. We thank you so much for being with us this morning, Dr. Cherry. You are an amazing woman of God with a wealth of knowledge in the area of Jesus, but also in the area of in the therapeutic world. So we appreciate you for being here with us this morning. We also have one of our courageous, dynamic preachers, as you would know him in the voice of Minister Jairicus Collins. You may have heard him. He's a part of the FMPBC family, just FYI, but you may have heard him on different platforms, preaching, teaching, and also speaking about current events today. So we welcome you, Minister Collins, for being with us today. We have some other dynamic leaders with us. We have Trustee Jason Allen, who's a faithful member of First Mount Pleasant Baptist Church, but he's also an educator, a community activist, and we appreciate him for being with us this morning. We also have one of our dynamic leaders at FMPBC, Brianna Strouder. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. She is a leader within our youth and young adult ministry, as well as one of our youth, Bryson Strouder, who's also a very active member at FMPBC, as well as our lovely Janiyah Moss, who's also one of our recent graduates of First Mount Pleasant. We appreciate you for being here as well, for being a leader at our church as well as in the community. So thank you so much for joining us, to each of our panelists, and to you, our First Mount Pleasant family, far and wide, those who are part of our social media family. We thank you for joining us this morning, and we are just excited to jump right into it. Listen, this is what we call our kickback session, okay? And with our kickback session, we come forward with different thoughts and opinions, but also facts about the current events that is happening today in today's world. We know that so many news and social media outlets have given their voices, and you've heard their voices into your ears, and you've heard so much about what's happening today. But this particular platform that we're using today, we are going forward as the children, youth, and young adults, as well as adults and professionals. We want to allow our voices here within the church community, as well as within our own individual communities, as well as the different organizations that we represent. We want our voices to be heard, so you too can hear from our youth and our young adults, as well as some of our professionals, about what is happening today. And we also want to give you the tools that you need in order to move forward in our current state here in the United States of America with everything that is happening. So we're going to get started and jump into our questions today, this morning. Listen, if you have questions, please feel free to post your questions to our Facebook page as well as our YouTube page, okay? The other pieces I want you to know that is that please share, like, text a few of your friends, go ahead and inbox them on Instagram and Facebook and tell them to join this live this morning because we know it's going to be lit. All right, so we're ready, set, go. The first topic, panelists, I hope you're ready. You have your coffee. Everybody grab your beverage, grab your notebook, grab your pen because it's about to get lit. Hey, I'm so glad you're ready. All righty. Our first question, I'm going to open the floor and I'm going to ask that our very own Brianna Sister Strouder, if you would, Brianna Strouder, go ahead and answer this question for us. Right now, you all know that we are in a time where racism is very much so alive and even more visual than it had been in times past. As you know, that now with social media being alive and well, we are able to see racism up close and personal. We know that through our years, we actually saw it through our TV, movies, and maybe even our history books. But now, in the times that we live in, racism is right before our eyes. Quickly, within a drop of maybe 5 seconds, we can go live and we're able to see what is happening right now in our world. And so, what I want you to do today is I want you to go ahead and focus on this particular question. Brianna, regarding racism, what is your viewpoint on racism and have you ever been affected by it? Once Brianna answered this question, we're going to go ahead and open the floor for any of our panelists to join in and answer this question as well. All right. So I ask that you stay on mute. I'm going to go on mute, and Brianna, you have the floor.
Basically, racism is just discriminating on someone simply for the color of their skin. Like, you have no other reason, simply just because of their color. Personally, I have experienced racism. Growing up in Georgia, I went to school in Mississippi. A lot of people think it's just in the South, but it's literally everywhere.
Can you tell us just a little bit how you were affected by the racism that you actually experienced? What was it and how were you affected?
One time I can recall, I was driving back to school with one of my friends, and we were just driving through Alabama. Everybody driving speed limit. We were all doing good, and this cop just started following us for miles. And so eventually, they just kept following us, and they pulled us over. And it was like, "Oh, you're following too close to this car." And you just tell by the way they were talking to us and the looks they were giving us. They kept us on the side of the road for like 30 minutes. So it was just interesting to see how they let all of these other cars go by speeding, all types of stuff, but they chose to pull us over because we were a car full of black teenagers at the time. And so it was an older white man who pulled us over. He made a few remarks and things, but it was an interesting experience.
Wow, I know that had to be very uncomfortable and scary in that particular moment. To the rest of our panelists, what is your viewpoint on racism and have you ever been affected by it? The floor is open for you to answer that question, those questions.
Well, first of all, this is Dr. Cherry. I'll be glad to answer that. First of all, thank you, Pastor Riggs, for having me here. Thank you, Pastor Bishop Tate, for allowing me to be part of this panel. As many of you all know, I have an earned PhD, and I'm not going to say the school because my comment is about the school. But those who know me will see it. And there was a professor there who was helping me, a white female professor who was helping me write my dissertation. She was Team Cherry. I was like, wow, she is on my team. Well, after I finished, one day I was talking to her and we had a relaxed conversation. I was thanking her for her support. And she was telling me how some of the African-American students wrote complaints against her when she was teaching. And I found that odd because I found her to be a really good teacher. She said that she did some research and she discovered that most of those African-American students had went to HBCUs. And she also discovered that at HBCUs, they just pass Black people along because they want them to have a degree. So that's why they couldn't handle the pressure in her class. And I was literally shaking. I couldn't believe she was saying that. And so I had to set her straight. I set her straight in a very Christian needle cherry like. And I was like, let me help you. Let's be real clear. The standards at HBCU are 10 times harder than anything I've ever experienced because most professors in HBCUs understand that we have to be 10 times better. So before you open your mouth to another African-American colleague to demean us in that way, you might want to think twice. her response was, I didn't mean it that way. I just thought, no, ma'am, that was totally out of line. And the fact that you felt comfortable enough to say it to me because I had became your one Black friend kind of shows where you stand on that. So I encouraged her to do some self-reflection. Even if you help a Black person, doesn't erase your thoughts and perceptions about race. You know, you have to be mindful of how you grew up, of what your real perceptions are, what your honest biases are. I mean, I hope that conversation helped her look at that, because she figured she helped me, so she was good with the Blacks. But that conversation, I didn't think she expected me to respond. I thought she expected me to be like, yeah, I see it. So thank you.
Thank you for sharing that, Dr. Cherry. That's a wow. I'll hold my comment there.
I'll come on the heels of Dr. Cherry because I think it's important that, especially in this setting, that we help to illumine the fact that even for those of us who are blessed to be able to go on to higher education and to achieve other things, that there are still forms of racism that exist in higher education. And I thought it was so interesting to hear Dr. Cherry's experience. I have one very similar. I too won't share the name of the institution where I obtained my master's of divinity degree, but I recall starting out on my MDiv journey and being very anxious and stressed about getting back our first survey class paper. You know, all of first year students were really, you know, anxious about it, not knowing exactly what to expect in this on this master's level in this Ivy League setting. And I remember getting a paperback from the professor and reading through it, very positive comments throughout the paper, not very much pushback on things and things of that sort, and got down to the end of the paper, and the professor's comments were, you know, were very positive, you know, great work, excellent research, all of that, you know, and the grade on the paper was an A minus. And I remember thinking, okay, well, you know, that's good. But this was my first paper, so it was important for me to figure out what it would take for it to be an A paper, right? My goal wasn't to write A minus papers, but to maximize it. And so I set up a meeting with the professor because none of the comments let me know where I was missing, you know, what I could have done better, et cetera. And so my desire was to just say, hey, what could have made this a great paper, an A paper? And sitting there with the professor, I explained it, and he took the paper out of my hand and read through his comments. And afterwards, he said to me, wow, things have really changed. In my day, an A minus was a good grade. And it let me know that, and he took his pen, scratched out the A minus, and made it an A right there in my presence. And so it said to me that in that moment, it wasn't about the quality of my work. There was something that said, although this paper, you know, and I'm not suggesting that the paper was perfect, don't get me wrong, but the problem here is that in that moment, there was something that said, although this is a good paper and an A paper, when I get ready to market, I'm going to market an A minus paper, right? And the only justification of this professor was that in his day, an A minus was a good grade. So again, you know, to face that really, this is my first paper. This is one of my first experiences, and it helped me to understand what was at stake when people looked at me and gauged the quality of my work, that somehow, for some reason, it was just not, it was inferior in some way for some reason. And it's important for you to know that it's, you know, racism just doesn't exist in, you know, in the hood, in the ghetto. Those types of systemic racism exist every place we go. Thanks for letting me share.
Thank you for that. That was It's another wow. I'll hold my comment for now. Would anyone else on the panel like to comment?
Well, I'll just jump in and, you know, still stay in the realm of education, but also thinking about what our youth and young adults face in schools every day. A lot of people don't know that in the state of Georgia, there are only 3% of Black male counselors or male counselors of color in public schools. And so when we think about trauma, when we think about how biases continue to happen in schools, how our young men and young women are pushed into the school to prison pipeline, they're kicked out of schools, attendance policies, all of these come through the counseling center. And so imagine being in a predominantly Black school, but your counselor doesn't look like you, or they can't identify with the situations or issues that are happening in your community, especially when it comes to race. I've seen white counselors coddle our students and tell them, oh, you can throw this across the room and you can, act out, it'll be okay. And in my mind, I'm like, no, it's not okay. Because if they go out in the street and do that, your cousin and your sister and your mama and your auntie are going to call the police. And we all know that when they call the police, it's going to be a different situation that happens. And so we don't look at racism in that sense when we come to the educational realm in K through 12, because it's happening every day. And we wonder why our young men and our young women have so many struggles with trying to get into an HBCU or a college when you have a counselor that doesn't value HBCUs. They see them as, lesser. They tell you that you will never be able to get into a PW, so you might as well just go to a technical college or, think about working at your uncle's barbershop. And these are things that I have heard counselors say to students in school. And so I think that, when we look at what's happening in higher education, we have to also imagine what our children and our young adults are going through K through 12 when they don't see anyone that looks like them, and then their counterparts will continue to make them feel less than. So I wanted to, just uncover that reality for a lot of our students that don't have anyone that they can relate to in regards to social and emotional learning in a lot of our public schools.
Thank you for sharing that, Jason, especially from an educator's point of view, to be able to let us see a greater insight into what's happening even now with our younger people who's still matriculating through, elementary, middle, and high school. Janaya?
Again, good morning, everybody. I was just gonna say, so we all know that racism is thinking that one is inferior because of their skin color. Okay, so I think really by the grace of God, I've never had no direct experience of racism, presented to me, but I know that I'm surrounded by it. It's all in my surroundings, in my area, especially considering the state that I live in. I do remember an experience when, of course, I'm a band head. So we had a parade and we went to Georgia Tech Band-Aid. That school is predominantly white here in the city. So we're marching through and literally I'm hearing all these type of slurs, they're not direct racial slurs, but you can tell, you can really read in between the lines what they were trying to say. And it was just so much, you could just hear it, because we were one of the predominantly Black bands there. And, it bothered me because I'm like, okay, I can't even react. I got to stay in one position because this person is in my ear and I can hear them talking, saying stuff. And I'm saying, okay, I know where I'm at. And then, I have family down in the country, Sandersville, when you're driving by, you see a lot of Confederate stuff. So yeah, that's pretty much what I've had, my deal of racism. But really and truly, in my opinion, racism is pretty disgusting to me, because if you want to claim that you're a so-called Christian, and this is for some Caucasians that want to say that they're Christian, and it says specifically in the Bible that, we're all made in God's image. So for you to even try to twist God's word and then try to, you know, put your own little racism and hate in that doesn't make any sense to me. That would never make any sense to me. So yeah, that's just how I feel on that.
Yeah, that's good, Janaya. What you share. And yeah, absolutely. We are to love everyone, but it's like these stipulations is put on who we love. And we see it every day. Minister Collins, did you want to go forward with a comment?
Yes. Can everyone, you can hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, again, thank you for inviting me. Honored to be on with everybody. I think that racism, you know, deals with sociology, deals with theology, and it deals with anthropology. It deals with all of those things, and basically meaning, you know, the way that we see people and the way that we interact with people and the way that we think about God is ultimately the way that we treat other folk. I think in the fabric of our country, it being in us, whether black or white, to see everything black as being negative. Black holes, you know, a black hole is a negative thing, or, you know, it was dark outside, you know, there was darkness, you know, that's perceived as negative. And everything white is perceived as pure and is perceived as right. And what we must understand is that, you know, racism is not an unintellectual type of thing that white folk do. Racism is very intellectual. And so they've thought this through for generations. They've thought about this. They have trained their children to hate people who are of different skin tones. They have trained their daughters to fear black men, and all of these things make up what racism really is in its entirety. So I think that it's deeper than a skin tone, because it deals with who people inherently think that someone is. Period. You know, so you can go to the highest schools in the land, but you're still a black person at an Ivy League, or you're still a black person who is a CEO. And so there's always a divide between living your fullest life because of the pigmentation of your skin and and how you show up in the world. So I think that racism is a beast that, you know, we all have to become honest with, because it has tried to suffocate us all. And we kind of, I think, you know, give out the same thing that we receive, even as black folk. We do it. We're doing what that community has done to us. And so I'm not talking about black on black violence. I'm talking about how we see one another in terms of skin color. You know, this whole colorism, you know, you're darker, then you're not beautiful, or you know, all of these beauty standards that's really geared towards trying to be white. And so I think that that's the truth about racism, that it is something that has always been since the inception and the creation of the country, of the nation. That you know, I was sitting and I was thinking that racism is literally 4 to 5 generations deep. This is not, you know, this is not police killing. It's more than George Floyd. It's not about George Floyd. It's not about Breonna Taylor. It's about 4 or 5 generations of people writing, preachers preaching, and it's about people writing literature and saying that Black people are inferior for 4 and 5 generations. This is deeper than police violence. This is how people see and think about God. They think about others, and they think about people of certain pigmentation. That we are nothing more than people who are worthy enough to just work for them and to build their country, but not be a part of it. And so I think that that's something that we have to really realize, that it's going to take more than marching and doing all of that, because this is generations of how people see other folk. Black people have always been inferior since the inception of the nation, and that's period. So I think that, that's what I think racism is. I think that I've kind of dealt with it in a microaggressive type of way. And so people will say things that I don't know if they realize that they're saying, but they're saying it. People say things like, don't, when I first went to Morehouse, there was this, white couple who they're I think they're good people. They sometimes just say things that, yeah. So they made a comment and said, don't go to that black school hating white folk. And so I don't think that they really realized what they were saying. But that was racism coming out of them. They feared me loving my blackness so much that it threatened them being who they were in my life. And I think that that's what we have to realize, that I think racism now is a microaggressive type of thing. Well, why do we have to say Black Lives Matter? And why this and why that? It's always a complaint from people who are privileged. That I think that's how I've experienced racism, and very microaggressive. Not in your face, but you kind of have to pick up on it, type of vibe. So yeah.
That was very good. There are, coming from a social worker's point of view, the layers behind racism is deeper than what we do see now. To piggyback on what you said, it also brought up a question that I like to pose to Dr. Cherry, and I know I'm veering just a little bit, but I think this is a very good point that I want us to kind of look at from the psychological standpoint when it comes to racism and what's happening now. One of the things that stuck out is when you spoke on how we view ourselves. And I know we'll eventually get to this discussion, but racism has put us into a place where we even view ourselves negatively, or we have altered who we are, generationally, in order to attain some of the things of our Caucasian counterparts, or to even be accepted. I too went to a very prestigious Caucasian, school, which the majority was Caucasian students. And so getting into that school, it was almost like you knew you were in this particular number that had to be accepted because of the color of your skin, or the professors were easy on you because of the color of your skin. And it's like, no, I am a very intelligent, young woman, and the papers I write, the information I'm able to give, the value that I add to this school is far more than what you can see because of the color of my skin. But I also realized that a lot of my peers had altered themselves, altered their, for lack of words, their blackness, in order to fit in to that particular box or that square so they can be accepted, versus taking hold of who they actually are, being able to express themselves the way that they express themselves, as well as walk through or matriculate through through this particular school with the knowledge and experiences that they had. And so sitting in some of those classrooms and listening to some of the professors, it was so out of touch to our race, for one, because the focus of a lot of my classes, the program as a whole, did not focus on the Black community. And if it did, it was because it was concerning the poor Black children, okay? And how we can help the poor Black children, and so I'm gonna get off that soapbox, because I want to ask Dr. Cherry this question. Psychologically, how can we as a race heal from how we've altered our mindsets to fit in to today's society, or into society, period? What is your view, and this is two questions, what is your view also on how racism have actually shaped, that's the question. What is your view on how racism have actually shaped our mindset as a Black man or Black woman in order to attain degrees, jobs, things of that nature, in order to attain these things, housing, cars, what is your view on how we are psychologically wired at this point in order to attain the same things as our white counterparts? I hope that wasn't a
No, I got it. No, I appreciate it. Thank you for the question. So in order to look at how it has affected us psychologically, we have to first kind of take a step back and look at how each of us were raised. So part of the misconception is that all Black people are the same, right? And I say that because we all come from different experiences and we were raised in different places. So I'm going to answer your question, but let me give you an example. I was born and raised in the Bay Area in California, Oakland, Berkeley-ish. Berkeley is it's right by UC Berkeley. It's a very hippie town. I didn't really experience that I didn't see it like that. I mean, I saw it as a kid because I was the only Black in my all white school, but I didn't really live it as a teen growing up in Oakland, Berkeley. But when I graduated, I went to the military. And when I went to the military, I met a young man who was born and raised in Virginia. And this person became my boyfriend. And so whenever we would go out together, I came from a place of blindness. I didn't see overt racism, just like Janiyah said. I didn't really experience that. But when I'm out with him, it was difficult for me because everywhere we went, he noticed it. He was like, why is that white guy following us? Why is that security guard right behind us? And I'm like, he's not. He's just doing his job. I was very caring. Like, I didn't see it. I didn't see it because I wasn't raised that way. But everything for him was about race. And it was challenging for me because I wasn't that open-minded yet. And I wasn't willing to see that it's probably about race. I thought he was being overly sensitive and he thought I was being extremely naive. So we have to first look at where we come from and what our values were. So growing up in Oakland Bay Area, my values were never yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, yes, sir, no, sir. That was never my values. When I arrived in Atlanta as a single parent with my daughter, true story, I enrolled her in an elementary school here in Morrow, Georgia. And the very first thing the teacher told us was she's going to have to say yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am to me. And I was like, where'd they do that? What that? We're not slaves. And I was really confused. Now, it could have just been a respect thing. But for me, it sounded like something from the movies. Because although we did respect, I was taught to respect my elders, I had never heard the phrase, yes, ma'am, no, except on TV. My parents, we had to say, yes, yes, yes. Here I come, mom. Here I come, dad. Yes or no. But we had never. So you got to look at where they come from. So back to answer your question. How is it the psychological makeup of African Americans when it comes to obtaining things? And it ties into who you are. And I don't want to sound like I'm rambling. I'm going to give you one more quick story. I'm full of cherry stories. I promise, Bishop Tate, this is my last one. In high school, because I was born and raised in Oakland, I had an amazing experience to be a foreign exchange student. I became a foreign exchange student to the country of Indonesia at 16. Lived in Indonesia. I speak fluent Bahasa Indonesia till to this day. I still communicate with a lot of my Indonesian friends. To this day, to this very day, 2020, this happened in 1987. Anytime I meet an Indonesian, anytime I meet a Black person or a white person, and I mention that I went to high school in Indonesia or that I speak fluent Bahasa, they all say, oh, your parents were in the military. No, my parents were not in the military. Well, how did you get to Indonesia as a Black girl? I get that all the time. I was a foreign exchange student for the state of California because I was intelligent enough to win that scholarship. And so that's foreign because they think if you went to another country as a Black kid, then you must have been somebody in the military. So what it taught me psychologically was because I'm from the Bay Area, it taught me something different. It taught me that I had to prove myself intellectually. It taught me I had to study and work harder. It also taught me I didn't need material stuff because nobody cares. Dope dealers can get the good stuff. I needed to walk into a room and I needed my name to speak for itself, not my labels, not what I had on my finger, not what I had on my wrist. I needed my name to speak for itself. And so I spent a lot of time focusing on my name, my reputation, my education, how I treat people, how I respond to people, how I show up. And so material things were never a big deal. And because that wasn't a big deal, those things came. However, my friend who was from Virginia, it was important to him to have things. because he needed to walk into a room and people see him and his stuff, because he didn't think they'd ever give him a chance to see his intellect. Let me be clear. I'm very clear. He was a Black man. As a Black man, he's not afforded the same pass as I am as a Black woman. I have an opportunity to let my name speak for itself. I'm at least given a 10-second head start to let my name speak for itself, where when he shows up, and I'm looking at Brother Jason has dreads. Brother Jason already has a target, because apparently men with dreads are dangerous. So this man didn't have dreads. He was in the military, clean shaven, the whole nine, but he still knew that his skin spoke for itself and not his name. So for him, he had to walk in with the designer suit. He had to walk in with the Rolex. He had to walk in with the clean car with non-tinted windows, but make sure it was a whatever the latest year was, because he needed his stuff to speak for him. And he had to hope, he said this to me, he had to hope that someone didn't look at that and think he got it from ill-gotten gains. That was his only hope. That was his battle. Will they think that I really earned this, or will they automatically assume that, I got it because I was a D-boy or a gangbanger? So psychologically, we first have to deconstruct who we are and where do we come from, and be real. Be real. People like me from California need to be very, very real and very silent when we're speaking with somebody who's from Alabama, who's from Georgia, who's from Virginia, who's from the Carolinas, who lived it. I can't just keep giving you cute little cherry stories and not sit silent enough to listen to those real experiences. Just because I didn't see them didn't mean they're not real. If I keep being ignorant, I'm no better than the average Karen. So I hope I answered your question.
I think that was really, really good. We appreciate your response. I just want to dig a little bit more, even with our young people who social media, as I mentioned before, is very, very huge amongst our children, youth, and young adults, where it is where when you talked about deconstructing how we view ourselves and our experiences as young Black people, growing up, our youth is experiencing more and more oppression because of social media. I'll just be honest, what do I need to do to obtain A, B, and C? Also, they're seeing, other races that are being afforded different opportunities and able to obtain, the things that they may want quicker, as well as quicker than it appears as though that they can. And so, what happens is that they turn to a life of crime. Suicide rates are going up as well. And it goes into a place of a low self-esteem, where either I'll never be, or they're going to take the approach that you took, which was, no, I'm going to make my name great by educating myself, for some getting a job and working at it and learning more about who I am and who I've been created to be. All right. And we understand, God has given us all a path, and he have actually put us in different families and connected us to different people to have the experiences that we have had thus far. For our youth, children, youth, and young adults that's watching this, we are hoping that you're getting much needed information to help you as you matriculate through school and life, that you're going to hit some bumps and bruises where what we call that invisible measuring stick you'll experience, we should say, where you will measure yourself against your peers and what they have and what they say, how they conduct themselves and the things that they have obtained throughout life. And it's not, one of the things I want to say is there you can obtain the same, but you are a different person, because we're all, we all have different destinies, you know what I mean? And so with that being said, I really love that, Dr. Cherry, when you talked about us deconstructing, because I too, as a young Black female, grew up in Detroit, went to all predominantly Black schools, lived in a predominantly Black neighborhood. My parents were what you would consider middle class, blue collar workers. And I did not experience racism. I had no idea what it was until I actually relocated south. And the truth of the matter is that my parents, because of my experience, the morals and the values inside of my household was, your name is going to be great regardless if you want it or not. You know, you have to go to school. You must get an education. Don't worry about clothes and hair. My dad, one of the biggest values I'll say he instilled in me was, you are to be a trendsetter. You are to be the trailblazer. You are not to follow, you know, what anyone else is doing. You have been created to be greater, better, and you yourself have your own trail to blaze and to leave a mark in this earth. And that's what I need you to focus on and do. And so they always push for me to get an education wherever I would go, and wherever I went. And my aunt and uncle too came. And this is when we start talking about the people we're connected to, which is why I really love working with youth and young adults and the children, because who you're connected to in your lifetime growing can really help direct your path. You know, when I left Michigan and moved to Georgia to finish up high school, my aunt and uncle, I had a slew of you know, schools I wanted to go to. And my uncle looked at me as I was, you know, when we went on our college tour, and he said, let me explain something to you. I don't care what seat you sit in. And my aunt and uncle are retired educators from California. They told me, they said, you are going to get an education in whatever seat you're in. What you sit there and glean is what you're going to use as you go throughout life. What school do you want to go to? Because whether it's a HBCU or not, you are going to get a great education wherever you go. And so when I chose to go to Albany State, I chose it because it was what I needed, you know, in order to get the education that I was looking for. And then I went on to other schools. And so with that being said, just us here that's on the panel, even those that are listening, if you do have children and youth and young adults, and even the ones that sit here at FMPBC, take a child that's, you know, 5, 6, 7, 8, and if you know that they come from a particular background where they may not get, and I know we're veering off a bit, but I do want to plug this here, that they may not be afforded the opportunity to receive a particular, you know, receive education, or maybe even receive certain morals and values that will help them as they grow throughout life. This is that moment, you know, where you take them under your wing and begin to mentor and show them, you know, you have an opportunity, you know, to be great. You know, I know that you live in the hood and you hear gunshots at night, but there's more to this world, and you have the opportunity to grasp hold of that. And so having those opportunities and those people allowed me to allow my psychological thought process basically to be different. Growing up on the east side of Detroit, knowing what drugs were at a very young age, seeing drugs being sold and, you know, used, but having those people to come in to say welfare isn't the only way. The projects isn't the only way. Drugs isn't the only way. And then they come in and they start instilling in me, like, this is what it means to go to college. This is what it means to graduate from high school. And in my immediate family, I was the first to come to get a high school diploma. You know what I mean? And so when you have those people that you're connected to say, listen, I know that your other counterparts may be able to achieve this because of this, you know, golden spoon that we talk about, but you too can achieve that. It's accessible to you. You know what I mean? And so those seeds that we drop to help their, you know, their mindset to be shaped along the way, if they never see us again after the 6 months or 3 months or 3 weeks with us in the summer camp, those seeds, and I'm a product of those seeds, trust me, they're planted, they're watered along the way, because God has a great way of ensuring that we continue to be connected and those seeds get watered and that increase come along, where at the end you're able to look back on your experience and say, oh my God, I not only did I made it, I am somebody, you know. And so I know I veered off. I got a feeling Overseer Tate want to chime in right here. Go ahead.
No, thank you for sharing that, Pastor Riggs. I think that's spot on. I do want to pivot just a little bit because we're slated to be on till 11, but this conversation can continue as long as people are here. It's fascinating, and I'm so glad. I want to shout out the Youth and Young Adult Ministry for facilitating this conversation today. But I want to pivot a little bit because I want to be sure that we are able to hear the perspectives of these young people as we imagine a better world, right? So what's important now is, we are coming to understand the systemic nature of racism. People are realizing that this is not a new construct. This is not new, right? This is not brand new. There's a consciousness that's happening, not just for not just for white people. And let's be clear, there is a consciousness that's happening with a lot of white people. The reality is, I want to say this, there are some persons of the majority culture who we have to acknowledge the fact that Dr. Cherry made this point very clear. If you are not raised around certain things, there are a lot of things that you simply are not privy to. And so sometimes we want to say, everybody understands racism. Everybody knows it's blatant, it's clear. And I'm not giving anybody a pass, don't get me wrong. But the reality is, if you've not grown up around other cultures, then you are by nature blind to the things that are significant to other cultures. You just don't know. If you don't know, you just don't know. So there is a consciousness that's happening, right? That after 400 years, this country was founded on a notion of white supremacy. It was founded on that notion of white people being superior. Anytime you get this notion that one group has the ability to enslave others, there has to be an innate supremacist model that exists in larger cultures. But at the same time, as we realize people are becoming more aware of systemic racism, white people, Black people, other people in general, the question becomes, Dr. King said it, where do we go from here? Right? That becomes the question. And so at this point, I really want to gauge some of the young people to get their thoughts around where they are and what does the world look like that they imagine going forward. So that's a question that I'd like to pose for Bree and Bryson and Janaya and Collins. What does that look like? What does it look like for us as a community? Let's be clear. Let's be clear. Sometimes as Black people, we're our own worst critics. Now, I don't want to shift too much. I don't want nobody to say, oh, no, you whitewashing it, Pastor Tate. I'm not. I just think that it's important in this setting that we are aware that a good bit of what because a lot of us don't deal with white folk. Let's be clear. In a lot of our settings, we don't really deal with white folk, so more of what we deal with are things that happen within our own communities. So let's look at that, the things that we have to look at. But again, to the young people, what does it look like for you guys? What is the word? What do you guys want us to hear? What do you want the church to hear? What do you want pastors to hear? What do you want adults to hear, right? What are those things that it's important for you all that we understand from your perspective that you feel like are going to continue to push us forward as a people, as we seek to become the change that we want to see in the world? So I'd like to put that out there for you all.
I can answer some of that. So to me, like where we're at now is like a time of awakening. I feel like everyone is really realizing it. And like you said, it's so much more that we have to deal with in our own communities. Because right under racism, we have classism. And like classism is so prevalent in our community. Like that's why so many of us can't get on the same page, because we feel like we're better than the other one, Like so many Black people, who have made something of themselves feel elite, and they feel as though I can't relate to anybody on the bottom anymore. I put myself up for my bootstraps. I'm here. And so I feel like we have to understand that we're all in this together at this point. You're not better than someone else just because you've accomplished these things or you were afforded these opportunities, because honestly, if someone else was afforded the same opportunities, they might be higher than you at this point. So I feel like we're facing racism, but at the same time, we have to combat, classism and colorism, because that's what's going on in our communities at this point. And as far as, getting to that next step, I don't think that we can get to that next step until we all come together in that sense. And then even with that, to me, we can't change anything in this country until we change everything, like the full basis. I feel like we need to do a whole reboot because, like you said, it's so systematic. Like it's this show, Black AF, and the every title is "It's because of slavery," and that's so true. Like when you think about all of the problems that we face, everything goes back to the beginning. Like it can be something as simple as, I went to all Black high school. I had 30 kids in my class from the time I was in like 5th grade. You go to another school somewhere else, they got 12 kids every day. And you think back, that's because of slavery, that's because of racism. Our communities are so broken down, and it all goes back to that. It's like I feel like we have to completely break down the full system in order to move somewhere. But we have to understand it and build together in order to even get that far.
Brianna, I'm glad you said that because that's exactly kind of where I was heading towards. The basis of it is like us as Black people, we're not even a full-on community right now. And, of course, like you said, we've hit an awakening, like lately it's been an awakening period because of everything that's been going on, the brutalities, the killings and stuff, which is, kind of okay in a way, but at the same time, we should have been seeing this coming. This is something that's been going on for longer before George Floyd, like Mr. Collins was saying, before George Floyd, before Ahmed, all of that. And so what I really think we need to do now as a people is just focus on coming up with an organized, structural plan for us to become more of a community than we already are. And also focus on, building up our economic status, because I did some research lately, and honestly, if you were to live Black, and when I say Black, I mean live completely Black owned, like completely Black owned everything, you would be sitting on a park bench. Because if you think about it, we don't really own anything. We have Black owned businesses. We have small Black owned businesses, which is great to see because that's us, our community building. I love to see our community thriving. Good. But if we really want to hit the basis of expanding us, expanding our brand, we need to tap into those resources like these grocery stores, car companies, assembly lines, factories, gas stations, oil, all of that. We need to tap into those type of resources in order for us to, gain some ownership, because we done built half of this country for about almost 400 years. So I think we should own about half of it.
Yes. Dr. Cherry?
I wanted to chime in real quick and support Brianna and Janiyah. I really like, Brianna, what you said about reboot. I think that's powerful. If you all get a chance, I highly encourage anybody that's on this call to look up Dr. Claude Anderson, Black man, Dr. Claude Anderson. Please read his material. So part of our problem that we have, though, and not refuting anything you all said, but is about ownership. And so there was a young lady who recently did a thing that's kind of went viral, and she talked about the monopoly in African Americans. If we're playing Monopoly, my favorite game, for 400 years you keep winning, and when it's time to let me play, you don't let me own nothing, I'll never win the game. And so even though we're not, I don't think we're as strong as a community as we are because of slavery, because we're constantly pitted against each other for colorism and all other things, and you're better than. We have to keep in mind also too that even one thing that no one on here said, one thing that bothers me in society when someone says something about Black on Black crime. If there's Black on Black crime, if a Black man breaks into my house, the police are going to arrest that Black man. He's going to be held accountable for breaking into my house, even though it was a Black man breaking into a Black woman's house. If a police officer does something to a person, a Black person, there's no repercussions. And so that's the difference. And so it's even if we look within, we can become a community all day, because our communities are not just our skin. I can get in community with all Black professors. I can get in community with all Black preachers. I can get in community with all Black women. The issue is we have to first recognize that we're not each other's enemies. I'm not your enemy. I'm not in competition with you. You know, Pastor Riggs, if you're a preacher, I'm not mad at Bishop Tate because he didn't put me on for Fourth Sunday, but he put you on. God called me to do a specific thing, and I'm going to meet people that you will never meet. That's the goal of the ministry. That's the goal of collectivism. That's the goal of us being in community, is wherever we are, how do we connect and make purpose? And the reality is one thing, going back to Pastor Riggs' question, and I still want to go back to the youth, I don't want to take away from their time, Pastor, is we have to look at how we are mentoring others, right? If I'm going to choose to mentor somebody, what I cannot be blind to, like Pastor said, is I can't be blind to certain resources that you may or may not have. It's very naive of me to believe and think that every person I'm going to mentor and save has access to the internet, has access to a laptop computer, has access to an Apple, has access to, a car to get to the places I want them to get to so I can mentor them. And so if I'm not looking at these youth and I'm not meeting them where they are and not holding them to my standard, but saying, hey, I'm here where you are. What can I do in baby steps to help you see something better and something brighter? Because if my parents never taught me how to own a Publix, I'm a 48-year-old woman with a PhD. I don't know how to own a Publix, but I don't know how to own a Quick Trip. I'm quite sure, like Janai just said, research can show me. But if I don't know how to do it, what do you think I'm going to mentor somebody else to do? I'm going to mentor them to go to college and to fill out your financial aid paperwork. I'm not going to mentor them on how to own a Quick Trip because I don't know how. We sometimes are going to have to cross the bridge. And I'm going to have to connect with those white owners who owns a Quick Trip and be like, hey, can you talk to me about taxes? Hey, can you teach me about gas companies and ownership? Because even as Black people, the reality, y'all, is that we do have to cross the borders. We got to connect. Like, we can't live in this bubble. We have to connect. And so every one of you youth, I really hope and encourage you doing just what Bishop said. I hope you're looking for a mentor. I hope there's some mentors like us who are looking for you. But I hope you're looking for a mentor, one that is Black and one that's not. If the white people own the stuff, find a white person and be like, hey, I tell all my youth, go somewhere, ask them, can you work for free for 1 month? Work for free 1 month. If they like your work ethic, ask them to put you on a solid salary. Let me work for free for 1 month, check my work ethic, then I'm going to ask that you take me up under your wing. And that's going to show your initiative and your commitment. In fairness, do white people have to do that? White teenagers? No. They mamas know the daddies who own the place and they'll start. I get that. I think Janai, I'm not sure if Janai or Brianna said it. It's because of slavery. We don't have the fair shake. We can't just walk in and say, Mama, can you call Uncle Bubba, who owns T-Mobile, and get me in as an executive vice president? We don't have, Ivanka Trump's life. But what we do have, you got to make the most out of it. I'm a diehard spades player. You got to know how to play your hand. And if your hand says, walk in, knock on that door, Mr. Construction Owner, can I work for you for 1 month? And if I do a good job, will you put in writing that you're going to put me on at least $100,000 a year salary? What's the downside? You work for a month and he doesn't hire you? You gambled a month of your life. That's the downside. That's a risk that might be worth taking. I hope I didn't take too much of your time. I know it's past 11 o'clock. I'm so sorry, y'all. I'm muting.
Real quick, I'm not, Ibram Kennedy has also a book, Ibram, Ibram Kendi, Kendi, entitled Stamped from the Beginning. He talks about that as well. He's a African-American historian, and he talks about how when white indentured servants were freed, they were given 40 acres. But when slaves was free, they were never given land. So that was the start in the early 1700s of land inequality. But to add to this, I think what I want to say that I think could just be impactful is that, I think what youth and young adult need, what Black youth and young adult need, is a free space. And I think that what this generation, what my generation, and what the younger generation is teaching all of us is that we have to now deal with the lies that we have told ourselves. The lies about who we really are, the lies about who we want to be, and learning that life is more than a facade. And so I think that we're having to deal with the truth, and that we want people to be truth tellers. If we're in a church that's not telling the truth, we'll leave that church and go to a church that is telling truth about our existence and about who we are as a full person. And so I think that if there's any advice as a leader, and I know that people say, well, people say that all the time, every generation. What I'm telling you, what I'm telling you is that never have there been a time where people have been so passionate about change as they are now. So whether you get on board or not, people are going to change. And one thing that I always say is that everything in our bodies change, but our minds. Our bodies get old, our teeth fall out, our hair become gray, but we feel like our minds can expand to experience and to imagine a new world and a new normal, right? So we're in the middle of a pandemic. This is even challenging us to imagine a new normal because things will not be the same. Things are not the same. And so I think that that's enough to really understand that Black children need more than telling them that, the highest thing you should achieve is to go to an Ivy League. Being at an Ivy League is not all of that. I can testify, it's not all of that. It's another institution, but we have to tell them how to become free, how to be free in their minds, how to imagine, how to create. A lot of Black children can't be free because they're trying to meet the expectations of their elders, because their elders have placed so many expectations on them in their own community. They can't be free to imagine a new world of possibility, because when you do something different that a former generation never had an opportunity to do, I don't want to ridicule, but never really had an opportunity to do, it's demonized, it's looked down upon. So we have to be able to free our children, to allow for them to teach us new things, to allow for them to stretch us and to help us to think about new possibilities. It's more than what you've learned. It's more than your church. It's more than the way you see things. But there is a larger world. There's a larger perspective that I think that we have to become more intentional about. That's the only way. Like Brianna said, we're going to recreate the system. That we literally have to demolish these perceptions that we have about one another, the perceptions that we have about ourselves, the perception that we have about the possibilities of what we can do in this life. So yes, that's what I'll say. Thank you again for allowing me to be on.
Okay. And Pastor Riggs, I just wanted to chime in. I will be very quick because I know it's after the hour. But I think, as Pastor mentioned, it's such a great conversation. A book that I'm currently reading right now is Black Privilege by Charlemagne the God, who's on the Breakfast Club. And it speaks so much to what Brianna and Janiyah were sharing in regards to classism and even the things that we think about ourselves. One of the things that I realized in teaching a lot of children that come from the same communities that I grew up in lower income middle-class communities. I know Pastor Tate can connect to this because, you know, where my family grew up was right across the railroad track from where him and his cousins and sisters and, you know, family members grew up. And so even our high schools were in the same communities. And I want to speak to those youth because there's such a misconception of those who come from the hood. And we need to dismantle the hood mentality. And if you come from this area because you sag your pants or you wear your hair a certain way, that's one of the reasons why I have locks, because I wanted to show my students that you don't have to be the stereotypes that people create for you. You can be bigger than that. So when I walk in rooms, it was so powerful when Dr. Cherry said that. I walk in the room, but I let my mouth show what my gifts are. So when people say, wow, I wasn't expecting that. Yeah, I know you weren't expecting that because my daddy taught me that. Like, you can never judge a book by its cover. And so many of our children who live in communities where there are shootings that are happening every evening, you know, they see their cousins and them on the corners that, you know, are slanging drugs and, you know, caught up in sex trafficking, the things that we don't want to talk about in our communities, but there's a way out. And I think that if we are willing to embrace those of us who don't have the same privilege and opportunities, you know, that's one of the things that I learned growing up is that when you have a great opportunity, you need to take it. A lot of people don't have, you know, those pathways to get opportunities. And I think that we have to reach them because those are our family members, our neighbors, our loved ones, our classmates who definitely are getting targeted by the police. They are definitely getting caught up in the pathways that are leading them either to prisons or to cemeteries. And so how are we really reaching them? And they have to be able to connect to us. We are the lights. I want to go back to our work even as Christians and what we do in our daily lives. That's why I'm so big on outreach, and Minister Riggs will, you know, attest to that. Every time she says, I want to do something with the youth, yeah, we need to do it because we need to reach them so we can reach a greater population of people who are in communities that are not even on Facebook, that will never get on a Facebook Live to hear a word from someone like Pastor Tate, or who would even walk into a church building. So we have to become that light. And how do we do that? We have to deconstruct our mindset. You know, Brother Collins just said that about our unwillingness to change our minds. And so if we are willing to recognize that we all, one, are human, beyond being Black, beyond being Christian, beyond being privileged, blessed, called, and highly favored, we are all still human. And if we can reach people there, then we can begin to deconstruct these very systems that hold so many of our youth back. So I wanted to, you know, just throw that out there. Again, that book is Black Privilege. It is very real. It is not PG-13, but it is very good context that I think will challenge our youth to say, hey, you know, I need to get out here and do the work. I have to get out here, take advantage of these free internships, learn the system, learn how they're building their wealth so you can go in and build your own. So thank you, Pastor Riggs, for letting me share that.
This is very good conversation. I know that we're running up on time, and I know we're going to start wrapping it up at this moment. But I want to thank you guys so much for sharing everything that you shared. That was a great question posed, Overseer Tate, regarding our young people. You guys are absolutely amazing. Thank you for sharing. I'm sure we're going to have some questions on Facebook as well that we'll have to answer when we wrap up. But to that point, Overseer Tate, I'm gonna let you go ahead with the floor, and then we're gonna get ready to wrap up soon. I know they don't want us to go. I'm looking at people and how they're staying on, like, wait. But I know we, you know, want to give them a little bit of their Sunday back. But we definitely want you to speak, and I am gonna ask you to also close us out in a moment as well.
All right, I see Dr. Cherry who wants to gift somebody with the book. Stamped from the beginning. So, you know, maybe one of these young people can be the recipient of that, Bree or Janaya. You know, I'll tell you what, if you gift one, Dr. Cherry, I'll gift the other. So we'll make sure they all get a copy of the book. Okay, we'll do it that way.
I'll chip in a book too, since we mentioned in the book. Here is the book too. I'll chip in something as well.
Well, thank you, Minister Collins. We appreciate that. Listen, I just want to say how essential it is to have these conversations. As you all know, this is sort of the culmination of our Vacation Bible School for 2020. We call it the COVID edition, right? Virtual. We've been in VBS Wednesday and Thursday, and then we wanted to have these critical conversations with our young people for church and community, because it is so important that we do this. And one of the things that we've been teaching, our theme for VBS was you concerned or committed? Either way, the question is, what's your contribution? And we've been talking through this whole notion of the fact that it takes everybody, right? It's not about them or they or those or whatever, but everybody has to find their ability to do something to become the change that they want to see in the world. And that community space is so important, and especially allowing an opportunity for these young people to be able to express their experiences, their feelings, their thoughts, what they're going through. Because we said all the time, you know, they're the future. They're right now. You know, these young people are right now. And what we're realizing is that they have such a zeal. They represent a coming of age for all of us, right? Their thoughts are different, you know, the way they process is different. And so as opposed to demonizing them and saying, oh, those young people, it's important, I think, that we come to the table and have understanding, right? Have some conversations that allow us to be able to simply hear their perspective. So this was our small attempt at doing that. And I want to salute Pastor Riggs and our phenomenal children, youth, and young adult ministry for the work that they are doing in this space. This is a big conversation. And it's going to be an ongoing conversation, because although we wish that we could twinkle our nose or click our heels and things just become different overnight, the reality is systemic change is going to take time. Dr. Cherry, to be able to have a therapist of your magnitude as a part of this conversation is simply priceless. So thank you for allowing time in your space. Collins, we can't say enough about this young man and what God is doing in his life, and the privilege, the blessing it is to be able to come alongside of him and just be able to watch the hand of God move so powerfully. I want to say this to us in closing, because I really believe, I really do, that this is a Kairos moment that is happening, that this is a God moment, that we say it all the time, God's ways are not our ways, God's thoughts are not our thoughts. And it really is true that we be able to see this from the spiritual lens, not that we over spiritualize it, right? Paul makes that point in Corinthians about the body. He says, first the natural body, then the spiritual, right? And some of us, as my spiritual father, Bishop Stephen Hall, would say, are so heavenly minded, we are no earthly good, that we understand that there is a practical side along with this spiritual side. I said the other day, if one more person tells me, well, we just gonna pray about it, I'm just gonna trip them up or something, because we know prayer is essential. But listen, I'm gonna pray and protest. Let's be clear. I'm going to have faith and works, right? So you run on in the prayer closet, because we know Jesus is going to fix it. But we also realize that he's going to use us, because whenever God gets ready to manifest something in the earth realm, make no mistake about it, he always allows humankind to be a part of it. That's the reason why, even with the creation, that mankind became a part of it and a partner. So I want to say that, but I want to say this in closing, because it's important. I think that this piece about community and Black people starting to adopt a different perspective on how we deal with our own is a conversation that we cannot gloss over. I want to say that we will never be seen differently in the eyes of others as long as they have the vantage point of realizing that in some ways we don't see and value our own lives differently. I read about this story about a bee, a honeybee that fell into the honey pit. This honeybee falls into the extractor, and the beekeeper saw it. The honeybee falls into this vat of honey, wings get all sticky. The bee itself will drown in the honey, except for the fact that the beekeeper saw it, scooped the bee out of the honey, and put the bee back at the entrance of the hive. And what the beekeeper knew was that if he could get the bee back into its community, that the community had the capacity to restore the bee. Here's what happened. Within seconds, the other bees swarmed around the bee that had fallen into the pit. And they feverishly were buzzing around the bee. And if you didn't know what was going on, you would think that was some kind of an attack. You would think that there was some kind of fight. But what was happening was that when that beekeeper put that fallen bee back in its community, the rest of the community came and rallied around that bee. And they all took turns cleaning off all of the honey that had attached itself to the bee when it fell into the honey pit. I mean, they were all just taking their turns, just cleaning that bee up, because they knew until all of that honey that bee had fallen into was cleaned off, that bee would not be restored. That bee would not be able to fly. And you know what's so interesting about that story is that even though the bee has somehow fallen into the honey, the other bees didn't jump up and say, "Why did you do that? How did you end up falling in the honey? You know better than that. You weren't raised to be falling in no honey. Didn't we teach you better? You should have not done that." They didn't do that. They didn't waste time going through all of this woulda, coulda, shoulda. They took their fallen bee into community and they cleaned that bee up. And I believe, saints, today that's part and parcel of what God desires for this Kairos moment, that as we seek to be justified in the eyes of others, that as Black people, we take a moment and see the value in one another. We are not monolithic. I say it all the time, you got to be careful, because everybody wasn't raised the same way you were raised, right? And that's just a fact. It ain't no good or bad or this, that, and the other. Everybody has their ways. I talk about that all the time. But what is essential is that we get to a place where we realize as a community, right, as a church, individually and as the church as a whole, that we've got a responsibility to restore those who we find in fallen situations, that we have an obligation to God and to one another to manifest change in our own, not just community, in our own homes, that we understand that even if we fall, even if we make mistakes, even when we miss the mark, even when things happen, that we have a community that before they demonize us, before they point their fingers in our face and wag it and talk about why, that we would restore one another. And listen, I just believe, I really do, that when other cultures see us taking care of each other, when other cultures see us valuing each other, then that too becomes a part of other cultures seeing the value in us. And so I just want to put that out there. In that scenario, God is the beekeeper who specializes in plucking us out of bad situations. God specializes in getting us out of stuff that if it had not been for the Lord who got us out of it, my God, where would we be? And there are no big eyes, there's no little U's. All of us have found ourselves in situations where we have fallen into the honey pit and we needed the beekeeper to scoop us out. But the question becomes today, whether you're concerned or committed, what's your contribution? What are you doing to help clean up others who are falling? What are you doing to help the community move forward? What are you doing to help the church to become, to continue to be the beacon of hope and of light and the example that we need to be for such a time as this? Not running around talking about, oh, the young people, they're crazy, they this, they that, but taking an opportunity to have a conversation with somebody. Pull your grandchildren aside, right? Have a conversation with them. You know, yes, they have an experience. We've had an experience. You know, civil rights is nothing new, right? But the point now is not to say, oh, y'all ain't been through nothing. What we had to go through was 10 times worse. Listen, we're not in a contest to decide which generation had it worse. That's not the point. We ain't here to say, well, it was so much worse in the 60s and y'all ain't got that. You've missed the point. That's a distraction. That's what keeps us from being able to move forward. But let's continue to have the conversations. Let's continue to ask ourselves the question, what is my contribution? Yes, we're going to pray, but we're going to make sure that in addition to our prayers, which continue to solicit the activity of God, that God is also going to be able to know that God can depend on us being the hands and the feet and the mouths that God can use for such a time as this. Thank you to all of our presenters on today. Special shout out to these young people, Bree and Bryson, who didn't say very much, but Bryson, I want you to know your presence alone here says so much. And all of this that we're doing, Bryson, is so that as a brilliant Black boy who is going to grow into a brilliant Black man, that we are so intentional about creating a world that is going to be so much better for you than it has been for so many other brilliant Black boys and men before you, Bryson. And that's our contribution. That is our commitment to you, is that our minds are after that, our prayers are after that, and we are committed to it. And we want you to know that you will always have a place at the table. Your thoughts are valued. Janaya, your thoughts are valued. Bunny, your thoughts are valued. We are literally waiting on bated breath to hear what you have to say, because we believe that when you all open your mouths, it's another expression of the voice of God. And we are here to hear what God is speaking through all of you. I love you all. Thank you all so very much. Pastor Riggs will continue this conversation. Collins, just keep being great, brother. Just keep being great. Trustee Jason, stay on the battlefield. Dr. Cherry, your voice, your brilliance is what's going to move this conversation forward. And Pastor Riggs, you know, you just the GOAT. I'd be talking till tomorrow this time with all of your accolades. Thank you for the vision of doing this and creating this particular model. First Mount Pleasant, thank you all for tuning in. Y'all are still here. So many others, I see you on Facebook and all of that. So thank you for that. I'm looking through these comments. Amen, amen, amen. We're going to do it. We're going to do it. Listen, as you all know, this was very different for us today, but this is still our service format. Amen. And there may be somebody here who does not know the Lord Jesus Christ. Listen, there's never a bad moment to be able to extend the opportunity for somebody to come into relationship with Jesus Christ. And we are not afraid of the gospel. Amen. We are not too timid to be intentional about our responsibilities as faith partners to come alongside of individuals who need to know the love of Jesus Christ. So if that's you, we want to pray. We've got prayer counselors who are available. Amen. So just type that out. If you're on Facebook watching us, just type that in there. I need prayer. I want prayer. I want to be saved. We want to be intentional about coming alongside you and your relationship with Jesus Christ. Amen. And then secondly, we know that giving is a part of worship, and we want to remind and invite everybody to be intentional with your gifts on today. Amen. Believe it or not, even though we are no longer able to worship together right now corporately in the physical church structure. We know that the church is not shut down because we are the church. Amen. We've just been catapulted out of the building and into the community. And I think that even in that, the hand of God is showing itself strong and mighty. But the work of ministry continues. And so we continue to solicit your free will giving, your tithe, your offering for the continued work of ministry. So First Mount Pleasant, you all know what to do. We want to be sure that we can get our giving options up. Amen. Some way or the other. Maybe Pastor Riggs, we can just get the screen and put it up there or something like that. But we want to ensure that the work of ministry continues, and we're able to do that by you continuing to sow seed into fertile ground. Giving is a part of worship, and no worship experience is complete without an opportunity to sow seed into fertile ground. We thank God for your partnership. We thank God for your gifts, and we thank God for all the ways that you make to continue to be connected to the ministry that God has given us at First Mount Pleasant Baptist Church. Thanks again, everybody, for tuning in on today. These conversations will continue. The work will go on, and we'll believe in God together. Amen. We'll believe in God together for the promise of a better day. Amen. All right. Praise the Lord. Pastor Riggs, I'm going to put it back into your hands, and you can close us out.
Thank you so much, Overseer Tate, and to all of our panelists. I love you. Thank you to everybody that's watching at FMPBC, those who are with us at the physical building and those that's across the land. You know, our e-church, we love you and we thank you for being with us today. Listen, as Overseer Tate said, we are going to continue this conversation. There was so much that we wanted to get to today that we just didn't have enough time. But we thank you for staying with us. We thank you for staying tuned in. We pray that this blessed you and that it also put some fire in your bones. One of the things that Overseer Tate said was, what is your contribution? That was definitely one of our closing statements for today. When we all go out, those who are on our panel, also those who are watching us live, what is your contribution? I'm sure when we come back together, that's something that we're going to look at, as well as visit what have we done thus far to help push towards change, as well as to be the change within our communities, within the government. Our very own trustee, Jason, he is very, very, very resourceful. If you want the resources that Trustee Allen has shared with us, please, 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 in the comments on Facebook, on YouTube, and even you can even email us at FMPBC2K@gmail.com, so you can receive these resources via email. And we'll also post those resources to our social media channels. We'll post them to our social media channels so they are accessible to you. So again, thank you so much. I know that we are hitting our time, but we thank you for giving us your time, which you cannot get back. So we know that that's very valuable, and we appreciate each of you for that. To all of the panelists, I can't wait for us to come back here again to have this type of conversation, but on a few more topics. I won't reveal what they are now, but I will say that we will be back again for that. So I love you. I thank God for you. Just really quick, I pray that the Lord will bless you richly. I pray that as you go throughout the week, that God will provide everything that you need. I pray that every place where there is a need, that God will begin to fulfill those needs immediately on your behalf, that your family is covered, that your friends are covered, that everyone connected to you, they are covered throughout this week and forever. I pray even now that for those who are on YouTube and Facebook, that if you are sick, that God will heal your body. For those who are going through, that has no peace, can't sleep at night, suicidal, even those who are having crying spells, anxiety, stress, fear, I pray even now that God will begin to give you peace and speak peace to you, and that peace begin to fill your home even now in the name of Jesus. I pray for those who have come asking, what must they do to be saved? How can they be the change? What is it that they contribute? I pray that God will show you exactly who he created you to be and how you are the change in this very moment, this dispensation that we're in right now. I pray for every person on this panel. I pray that God will continue to richly bless you and provide you with everything that you need. We thank you. We bless God for you. It is in Jesus' name we pray. We love you. We'll talk to you again soon. Listen, catch us on Wednesdays. We'll post our information so you can catch us on Wednesday nights for our Worship and Word Wednesday. We have Bible study, but hey, because we're FMPBC, sometimes we do things a little bit differently, and the type of Bible study we have, you're not ready for it. It's lit, Jesus is in it, and we're able to enrich not only your soul, but also your life. So we're praying that you join us on Wednesdays as well as every Sunday with our dynamic leader, Overseer Victor DeMonte. As always, we love you, we bless God for you, and we thank you for allowing us as young people to have this platform to be able to speak fluently about how we feel about the day and time that we're in, but not only that, how we as a church can move forward to ensure that we are making our impact in the world. Love you guys. God bless you. And I pray that I will see you soon on social media and one day face to face, right? So love you so much. God bless you. And thank you so much for joining us. See you all soon.